Hello everyone, my name is Winter Rain, Ice-Dragon VTuber, Dungeon Master and Variety Gamer. And today, I'm doing things a little slow, little differently. Wanted to do this for a while, but I figured why not start with storytelling a la Skyrim books. And by the books, I referred to the ones that you can collect in-game, the world of Skyrim, whether it's in caves, bought through stores, or stolen through an NPC's home. You can find a lot of these things, all in game. I had an idea of perhaps going into Skyrim and finding said books and reading it in game. Who knows how long it'll take to find books between little adventures. So instead, I'll be reading them through the Wikipedia for Skyrim. That way we can jump between story to story. And who knows, perhaps I'll even split these up and put them on YouTube for each individual book. That said, there's probably going to be a lot of them. Anyway, we might as well get started. So, from the Wikipedia. Oh. Hello, familiar faces. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a while since I've streamed. Life's been throwing a lot of curveballs, and let's just say baseball is not a sport I'm well acquainted with. But I'm rolling with the punches, and here I am. I don't know how long I'll stream for today, but I'm here. So, well, yes, thank you again, both of you, for showing up again. Dream, both you and Sin. As for the stories, we're gonna go from the very top. Looks like this one. I think it's, and by the top I mean it looks like alphabetical order. And the first book we have is 16 Accords of 16 Accords of Madness. Looks like the sixth volume. This one is entitled Hircine's Tale. Ever proud and boastful, Oblivion's mad prince stood 1/5 day of mid-year among the frigid peaks of Skyrim, and beckoned forth Hircine for parley. The huntsman god materialized, for this was his day, and the boldness of Sheogorath intrigued him. Wry without equal, Sheogorath holds in his realm giggling loons, flamboyant auteurs, and craven mutilators. The mad prince will ply profitless bargains and promote senseless bloodshed for nothing more than the joy of another's confusion, tragedy, or rage. So it was that Sheogorath had set a stage on which to play himself as a rival to Hircine. Without haste, the coy prince proffered his contest. Each prince was to groom a beast to meet at this place again, 3 years to the hour, and do fatal battle. Expressionless behind his fearsome countenance, Hircine agreed, and with naught but a dust of snow on the drift, the princes were gone to their realms. Confident, but knowing Sheogorath as a trickster, Hircine secretly bred an abomination in his hidden realm. An ancient Daedrith he summoned, and imbued it with the foul curse of lycanthropy. Of pitch heart and jagged fang, the unspeakable horror had no peer, even among the great hunters of Hircine's sphere. On the third year, on the given day, Hircine returned, where Sheogorath leaned, cross-legged on a stone, whistling with idle patience. The prince of the hunt struck his spear into the ground, bringing forth his unnatural, snarling behemoth. Doffing his cap, sly as ever, Sheogorath stood and stepped aside to reveal a tiny, colorful bird perched atop a stone. Demurely it chirped in the bristling gusts, scarcely audible. In a twisted, springing leap, the Daedrith was upon the stone, leaving only rubble where the boulder had been. Thinking itself victorious, the monster's bloodied maw curled up into a mock grin, when a subdued song drifted on the crisp air. The tiny bird lightly hopped on the snout of the furious Daedrith. Sheogorath looked on, quietly mirthful, as the diminutive creature picked at a bit of detritus caught in the scales betwixt the fiery eyes of the larger beast. With howling fury, the were-thing blinded itself trying to pluck away at the nuisance, and so it continued for hours, Hersian looking on in shame while his finest beast gradually destroyed itself in pursuit of the seemingly oblivious bird, all the while chirping a mournful tune to the lonesome range. Livid but beaten, Hersian burned the ragged corpse and withdrew to his realm, swearing in forgotten tongues. His curse still hang in those peaks, and no fair wayfarer tarries for fear of his wrathful aspect in those obscure heights. Turning on his heel, Sheogorath beckoned the minuscule songbird to perch atop his shoulder, and strolled down the mountain, making for the warm breezes and vibrant sunsets of the Absian coast, whistling in tune with the tiniest champion of Tamriel. So that was interesting. A lycanthropy-imbued demon versus what I only assumed to be he said a small songbird. I was thinking something of the sort of like a hummingbird, but it's not a songbird. How tricksy you can be, Sheogorath, the Mad Prince. The next one is 16 Accords of Madness, volume, if I know my Roman numerals right, that is volume 9. Sheogorath and Vermina strike a bet. I'm glad you guys are liking this. This is always actually what I wanted to do for streams, but you know, D&D takes a lot of organization and stuff, so it's kind of a wonder I haven't done this earlier. That said, Vermina's Tale. Darius Shano found himself running as fast as he could. He had no idea where he was running from or towards, but he didn't care. The desire saturated in his mind. There was nothing in the world except flight. He looked around for landmarks, anything to place himself to use as a target, but to no avail. Sorry, I'll say that one more time. He looked around for landmarks, anything to place himself or to use as a target, but to no avail. The featureless grasslands through which he was sprinting extended as far as the eye could see. I just have to keep running, he thought to himself. I have to run as fast as I can. On and on he ran, with no end in sight or in mind. Standing over Darius Shano while he lay quietly in his bed were his mistress, Vermina the Dreamweaver, and the mad god Sheogorath. Vermina looked down with pride at this disciple of hers, and it was boastful of her little jewel. Such potential in this one. Though dreams of inspiration, I have nurtured I have nurtured literary talent into fruition, and now he stands in acclaim as an emerging bard and poet. He will gain much favor before I tire of him. Sheogorath, too, gazed at the young Breton artist and saw that he was indeed famous amongst the other mortals. Okay, I'm pausing here real quick because I'm trying to realize what's going on. Darius Shano. Who is Darius Shano? Is this who they're talking about? Standing over Darius Shano while he lay quietly in his bed. Okay, so Darius Shano is the guy in bed, and Vermina, the Dreamweaver, and the mad god Sheogorath are looking down upon him, probably from like their realm or something. And he's a young Breton. Okay. Actually, before we continue, okay, that's what it is. I looked up Darius Shano, the link in the Wikipedia, and it says, according to myth, Darius Shano was a Breton writer living in Dania sometime in the Third Era, and was subject to a wager between Sheogorath and Vermina on who could make Darius more hated by the populace. Okay, I guess that's what the story is about. So, going back. Mused Sheogorath, but how many are there who hate this mortal whom you have built? It is the hatred of the mortals which confirms greatness, not their love. Surely you can accomplish this as well. Vermina's eyes narrowed. Yes, the mortals are indeed often foolish and petty, and it is true that many of their most bold have been despised. Do not worry, Mad One, for I have the power to achieve many forms of greatness with this one, hatred among them. Perhaps, Dreamweaver, it would be amusing to show who has this power. Inspire foolish, arrogant hatred of this mortal for 10 years, and I will do the same. We shall see whose talents are most efficient, free of aid or interference of any Daedra. At this, she relaxed into confident pleasure. The mad god is indeed powerful, but this task is suited to my skills. The mortals are repulsed by madness, but rarely think of it worthy of hate. I would take pleasure in revealing this to you, as I'm the more suitable horrors of this mortal subconscious. She's just they're both just tormenting this poor guy. And so, in the 19th year of his life, the dreams Darius Shano had been experiencing began to change. Fear had always been a part of the night for him, but now there was something else. A darkness began to creep into his slumber. A darkness that sucked away all feeling and color, leaving only emptiness behind. When this happened, he opened his mouth to scream, but found that the darkness had taken his voice as well. All he had was the terror and the void, and each night they filled him with new understanding of death. Yet, when he woke, there was no fear, for he had faith that his lady had a purpose. Yeah, to torment your ass. Indeed, one night Vermina herself emerged from the void. She leaned in close to whisper into his ear. Watch carefully, my beloved. With that, she pulled the void away, and for hours each night she would reveal to Darius the most horrible perversions of nature. Men being skinned and eaten alive by other men, unimaginable beasts of many limbs and mouths, entire populations being burned, their scream filled in his every evening. In time, these visions gnawed at his soul, and his work began to take on the character of his nightmares. The images revealed to him at night were reproduced in the page, and the terrible cruelty and hollow vice that his work contained both revolted and fascinated the public. They reveled in their disgust over every detail. There were those who openly enjoyed his shocking material, and his popularity among some only fed the hatred of those who found him abhorrent. This continued for several years, while the infamy of Darius grew steadily. Then, in his 29th year, without warning, the dreams and nightmares ceased. Darius felt a weight lifted, and he was no longer endured the nightly tortures, but was confused. What have I done to displease my mistress? He wondered aloud. Why has she abandoned me? Vermina never answered his prayers. No one ever answered, and the restless dreams faded away to leave Darius in a long, deep sleeps. Interest in the works of Darius Shana waned. His prose became stale, and his ideas failed to provoke the shock and outrage they once had. As the memory of his notoriety and his terrible dreams faded, the questions that raced in his mind eventually produced resentment against Vermina, his former mistress. Resentment grew into hatred, and from hatred became ridicule, and over time ridicule became disbelief. Slowly it became obvious. Vermina had never spoken to him at all. His dreams were simply the product of a sick mind that had righted itself. He had been deceived by his own subconscious, and the anger and shame overwhelmed him. The man who once conversed with a deity drifted steadily into heresy. In time, all the bitterness, doubt, and sacrilege focused in Darius, a creative philosophy that was threaded throughout all of his subsequent work. He challenged the gods themselves, as well as the infantile public and corrupt state for worshipping them. He mocked them all with perverse caricatures, sparing no one, giving no quarter. He challenged the gods in public to strike him down if they existed, and ridiculed them when no such comeuppance was delivered. To all this, the people reacted with outrage far greater than they had shown for his previous work. His early career had offended only sensibilities, but now he was striking directly at the heart of the people. His, his body of work grew in size and intensity. Temples, nobles, and commoners were all targets of his scorn. Finally, at age 39, Darius wrote a piece entitled The Noblest Fool, ridiculing the emperor god Tiber Septim for integrating into the pathetic Nine Divines cult. The local king of Dania, who had been humiliated by his upstart in the past, saw his chance. For his sacrilege against the empire, Darius Shanna was executed with their ceremonial blade in front of a crowd of hundreds. At his last bitter words were gurgled through a mouthful of his own blood. 20 years after the wager was first placed, Vermina and Sheogorath met over Darius Shanno's headless corpse. The Dreamweaver had been eager for this meeting. She had been waiting for years to confront the Daedric prince over his lack of action. I have been deceived by you, Sheogorath. I performed half of the bargain, and but during your 10 years, you never contacted the mortal once. He owes none of his greatness to you or your talent of influence. Nonsense, croaked the mad god. I was with him all along. When your time ended and mine began, your whispers were in his ear, were replaced with silence. I severed his link to that form which he found most comfort and meaning, and withheld the very attention to the creature he so desperately craved. Without his mistress, this man's character would ripen under resentment and hatred. Now his bitterness is total and, overcome by madness fueled by his rage, he feeds me in my realm as an eternal servant. Sheogorath turned and spoke to the empty space by his side. Indeed, Various Shanno was a glorious mortal, despised by his own people, his kings, and even by the gods he mocked. For my success, I shall accept 60 followers of Vermina. Oh, wait. That's Sheogorath talking. Indeed, Darius Shanno was a glorious mortal, despised by his own people, his kings, and even by the gods he mocked. For my success, I shall accept 60 followers of Vermina into my service, and the dreamers will awaken as madmen. And thus did Sheogorath teach Vermina that without madness, there are no dreams, and no creation. Vermina will never forget this lesson. Well. I'd rather like that story. And yet, here we are with a third story. 16 Accords of Madness, Volume 12. Malakath's Dealings with Sheogorath. Let's see here. Malakath's Tale. In the day before... Whoa, that's a word. That's a fictional word. Orsinium. I'm sorry, what's Orsinium? Orsinium, also called Nova Orsinium, is an orcish city-state within Tamriel. Okay, it's in Daggerfall and Elder Scrolls Online. Okay, that's why I don't recognize it. But still, that's cool. Lore from the books came into products of the Elder Scrolls games later on. I like that whole shared universe kind of thing. But you weren't here to listen to me ramble about other pieces of lore. This is story time. Malakath's Tale. In the days before the Orsinium's founding, the spurned orc folk were subjected to ostracism and persecutions even more numerous and harsh than their progeny were accustomed to in their own age. So it was that many champions of the Orsimer traveled, enforcing what borders they could for the proliferation of their own people. Many of these champions are spoken of yet today, among them the Cursed Legion, Groma the Hairless, and the noble Emeg Grokaya. This latter crusader would would have certainly risen to legendary status throughout Tamriel had he not been subject to the attention of a certain Daedric prince. Emig, that's a name. Emig Grokera. Emig Grokera. Kera. Emig Grokera was the bastard son of a young maiden who was killed in childbirth. He was raised by the shaman of his tribe, the Grillikamog, in the peaks of we now call Nomar Heights. Late in his 15th year, Emig forged by hand an ornate suit of scaled armor, a rite of ascension among his tribe. On a blustery day, he pounded the final rivet and draped a heavy cloak under the bulky mantle. Emig set out from his village for the last time. Words of his exploits always returned home, whether defending merchant caravans from brigands or to liberate enslaved beast folk. News of the noble arch-crusader began to grace even the lips of Bretons, often with a tinge of fear. Less than 2 years of ascending to maturity, Grokera was making camp when a thin voice called out from the thickening night. He was surprised to hear the language of his people spoken by a tongue that obviously did not belong to an orc. Lord Kera? Rather, Lord Kera, said the voice. Tales of your deeds have crossed the lips of many and reached my ears. Peering into the murk, Emig had made out the silhouette of a cloaked figure, made wavy and ephemeral by a hazy campfire. From the voice alone, he had thought the interloper an old hag, but he now decided he was in the presence of a man, slight and lanky build, though he could discern no further detail. Perhaps, the wary orc began, but I'd seek no glory. Who are you? Ignoring the question, the stranger continued, Despite that, Orsmer, glory finds you, and I bear a gift worthy of it. The visitor's cloak parted slightly, revealing nothing but faintly glistening buttons in the pale moonlight, and the bundle was withdrawn and tossed to the side of the fire between the two. Emig cautiously removed the rags in which the subject was swathed, and he was dazzled to discover the item to be a wide, curved blade with ornately decorated handle. The weapon had heft, and Emig realized on brandishing it that the elaborate pommel disguised the more practical purpose of balancing the considerable weight of the blade itself. It was nothing much to look at in its present condition, but the orc, It was nothing much to look at in its present condition, thought the orc, but once the tarnish was cleaned away and a few missing jewels restored, it would indeed be a blade worthy of a new champion 10 times his own worth. Her name is Neb Kreskin, spoke the thin stranger, seeing the appreciation lighting Grokera's face. I got her for a horse on a secret in warmer climes, but in my old age I'd be lucky to even lift such a weapon. It's only proper that I pass her on to one such as yourself. To possess her is to change your life forever. Overcoming his initial infatuation with the Ark of Hone Steel, Emig turned his attention back to the visitor. Your words are fine, old man, Emig said, not masking his suspicion, but I'm no fool. You traded this blade once, and you'll trade it again tonight. What is it that you want? The stranger's shoulders slumped, and Emig was glad to have unveiled the true purpose of this twilight visit. He sat with him a while, eventually offering a sack of furs, warm food, and a handful of coins in exchange for the exotic weapon. By morning, the stranger was gone. In the week following Emig's encounter with the stranger, Neb Crescent had not left its scabbard. He had encountered no enemy in the woods, and his meals consisted of fowl and small game caught with bow and arrow. The peace suited him fine, but on the seventh morning, while fog still crept the low-lying boughs, Emmig's ears pricked up at the telltale crunch of a nearby footfall in the dense snow and forest debris. Emmig's nostrils flared, but he was upwind. Being unable to see or smell his guest, and knowing that the breeze carried his scent in that direction, Emmig's guard was up. He cautiously drew Neb Crescent with from its sheath. Emmig himself was not entirely sure of what happened next. The first moment of conscious memory in Emmig Grokrata's mind after drawing Neb Crescent was the image of a curved blade sweeping through the air in front of him, splattering blood over the virginal powder coating the forest floor. The second memory was a feeling of frenzied bloodlust creeping over him, but it was then that he saw for the first time his victim, an orc woman, perhaps a few years younger than himself, her body a canvas of grisly wounds, enough to kill a strong man 10 times over. Emmig's disgust overwhelmed the madness that had overtaken him, and with all his will enlisted, he released the crescent from his grip and let the blade sail. With a discordant ringing, it spun through the air, and it was buried in a snowdrift. Emmig fled the scene in shame and horror, drawing the hood up on his cloak to hide himself from the judging eyes of the rising sun. Pantsmob, thank you for what's the word I'm looking for? Hello. Thank you for the like, I appreciate that. The scene where Emmig Grokrata had murdered one of his own was a macabre one. Below the neck, the body was flayed and mutilated beyond recognition, but the untouched face was frozen in a permanent expression of abject horror. It was here that Sheogorath performed certain rites that summoned Malakath, and the two Daedric lords held court in the presence of the disfigured corpse. "Why show me this, mad one?" began Malakath, once he recovered from his initial wordless outrage. "Do you take such pleasure in watching me grieve the murder of my children?" His guttural voice rumbled, and the patron of the Orsimer looked upon his counterpart with accusing eyes. "By birth she was yours, brother outcast," began Sheogorath, solemn in aspect and demeanor. "But she was a daughter of mine by her own habits. My mourning here is no less your own. No less than your own. My outrage no less great." "I am not so sure," grumbled Malakath. "But rest assured that vengeance for this crime is mine to reap. I expect no contest from you. Stand aside." As the fearsome prince began to push past him, Lord Sheogorath spoke again. "I have no intention of standing between you and vengeance. In fact, I mean to help you. I have servants in this wilderness, and can tell you where you can find our mutual foe. I ask only that you use a weapon of my choosing. Wound the criminal with my blade, and banish him to my plane, where I can exact my own punishment. The rights of honor killing here belong to you." With that, Malakath agreed, took the wide blade from Sheogorath, and was gone. Malakath materialized in the path of the murderer, the cloaked figure obscured through the blizzard haze. Bellowing a curse so foul as to wilt the surrounding trees, the blade was drawn, and Malakath crossed the distance more quickly than a wild fox. Frothing with rage, he swung the blade in a smooth arc, which lopped the head of his foe cleanly off, then plunged the blade up to its hilt in his chest, choking off the splurts of blood into a steady, growing stain of red bubbling from beneath the scaled armor and heavy cloak. Panting from the unexpected immediacy and fury of his own kill, Malakath rested on a knee as the body before him collapsed heavily backwards and the head landed roughly on a broad, flat stone. The next sound broke the silence like a bolt. I'm sorry, sputtered the voice of Emegrokrata. Malakath's eyes went wide as he looked upon the severed head, sweeping blood from his wound, but somehow kept alive. Its eyes wavered about wildly, trying to focus on the aspect of Malakath before it. The once proud eyes of the champion were choked with tears of grief, pain, and confused recognition. To this horror, Malakath recognized now that the man he had killed was not only one of his Orsimer children, but very literally a son he had blessed an orc maiden with years hence. For achingly long moments the two looked upon each other, despondent and shocked. Then, silent as oiled steel, Sheogorath strode into the clearing. He hefted Emegrokrata's disembodied head and bundled it into a small grey sack. Sheogorath reclaimed the present from the corpse and turned to walk away. Malakath began to stand but kneeled again, knowing that he had irreversibly damned his own offspring to the realm of Sheogorath, and had mourned his failure as the sound of his son's hoarse pleas faded into the horizon. God damn. that was pretty dark. Also, K Eclipse More, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Oh, Sheogorath, you crafty bastard. For better or for worse, that is the last entry, starting with 16 Accords of Madness. You would have thought that Bethesda would have written 16 actual Accords of Madness, but here we are. I'm glad, Kay, I'm glad. Our next story, 2920, Volume 1, Morning Star. This book in a series of books recounting the events surrounding the Second Empire during the last year of the First Era. If you are a Skyrim, or rather an Elder Scrolls history buff, is history buff the right word because it's about a fictional world? If you love lore, these ones are probably for you. Alright, here we are. Contents. One morning, first of the morning star, 2920. Mournhold Morrowind. These are names. Almalexia. Okay, that sounds pretty. Almalexia lay in her bed of fur, dreaming. Not until the sun burned through her window, infusing the light wood and flesh colors of her chamber in a milky glow, did she open her eyes. It was quiet and serene, a stunning reverse of the flavor of her dreams, so full of blood and celebration. For a few moments, she simply stared at the ceiling, trying to sort her visions. In the courtyard of her palace was a boiling pool which steamed in the coolness of the winter morning. At the wave of her hand it cleared and she saw the face and form of her lover, Vivek, in his study to the north. She did not want to speak right away. He looked so handsome in his dark red robes, writing his poetry as he did every morning. Vivek, she said, and he raised his head in a smile, looking at her face across thousands of miles. I have seen a vision of the end of the war. After 80 years, I don't think... Oh, sorry, that's the guy speaking. After 80 years, I do not think anyone can imagine an end, said Vivek with a smile, but he grew serious, trusting Almalexia's prophecies. Who will win, Morrowind or the Cyrodiilic Empire? Without Sotha Hill in Morrowind, we will lose, she replied. My intelligence tells me the Empire will strike us to the north in early springtide, by first sea at the latest. Could you go to Artaeum, to Artaeum and convince him to return? I'll leave tomorrow, she said simply. 4th Morning Star, 2920. Gideon, Black Marsh. The Empress paced around her cell. Wintertide gave her wasteful energy, while in the summer she would merely sit by her window and be grateful for each breath of stale swamp wind that came to cool her. Across the room, her unfinished tapestry of a dance at the imperial court seemed to mock her. She ripped it from its frame, tearing the pieces apart as they drifted to the floor. Then she laughed at her own useless gesture of defiance. She would have plenty of time to repair it and craft 100 more. The Emperor had locked her up in Castle Gioves 7 years ago, and would likely keep her here until he or she died. With a sigh, she pulled the cord to call her knight, Zook. He appeared at the door within minutes, fully uniformed as befitting an imperial guard. Most of the native Kothringi tribesmen of Black Marsh preferred to go about naked, but Zook had a positive delight to fashion. His silver, reflective skin was scarcely visible, only on his face, neck, and hands. "Your Imperial Highness," he said with a bow. "Zook," said Empress Tavia, "I am bored. Let us discuss methods of assassinating my husband today." 14th Morning Star, 2920. The Imperial City, Cyrodiil. The chimes proclaiming The chimes proclaiming South Wind's prayer echoed throughout the wide boulevards of the gardens of the Imperial City, calling all to her state temples. The Emperor Riemann III always attended a service in the Temple of the One, while his son and heir Prince Juliak found it more political to attend a service at a different temple for each religious day. This year, it was the Cathedral Benevolence of Mara. Oh, I know that place. That's where you get married in Skyrim. The benevolence services were mercifully short, but it was not until well after noon that the Emperor was able to return to the palace. By then, the arena and combatants were impatiently waiting for the start of the ceremony. The crowd was far less restless, as the potentate Versidue, that's a thing. What the hell is that? Potentate Versidue had arranged for a demonstration from a troupe of Khajiit acrobats. Your religion is so much more convenient than mine, said the Emperor to his potentate by the way of an apology. What is the first game? A one-on-one battle between the two able warriors, said the potentate, his scaly skin catching the sun as he rose, armed befitting their culture. I'm guessing this guy was like a Argonian or something if he's got scales. Sounds good, said the Emperor and clasped his hands. Let the sport commence. As soon as he saw the two warriors enter the arena, to the roar of the crowd, Emperor Raman III remembered that he had agreed this several months before and forgotten about it. One combatant was a potentate's son, Severin Chorak, a glistening ivory yellow eel gripping his katana and wakizashi in his thin, deceptively weak-looking arms. The other was Emperor's son, Prince Juliak, in ebony armor with a savage orcish helm, shield, and longsword at his side. This will be fascinating to watch, hissed the potentate, a wide grin across his narrow face. I don't even know if I've seen a Cyrodiil fight in a cave. Words. This will be fascinating to watch, hissed the potentate, a wide grin across his narrow face. I don't think I've ever seen a Cyrodiil fight in an Akavir like this. Ever seen a Cyrodiil fight an Akavir like this? Those are words that I'm not familiar with. I know Cyrodiil is like another state. Usually it's against army against army. At least we can also settle which philosophy is better. To create armor to combat swords as your people do, or create swords to combat armor as mine do? No one in the crowd, aside from a few scattered Akaviri councillors and the potentate himself, wanted Savirian Chorak to win, but there was a collective intake of breath at the sight of his graceful movements. His sword seemed to be a part of him, a tail coming from his arms to match the one behind him. It was a trick of counterbalance, allowing the young serpent man to roll up in a circle and spin into the center of the ring in an offensive position. The prince had to plod forward the less impressive traditional way. As they sprang at each other, the crowd bellowed in delight. The Kaviri was like a moon in orbit around the prince, effortlessly springing over his shoulder in attempt a blow from behind, but the prince whirled around quickly to block with his shield. His counter-strike only meant air as his foe fell flat to the ground and slithered between his legs, tripping him. The prince fell to the ground with a resounding crash. Metal and air melted together as Severian Chorak rained strike after strike upon the prince, who blocked every one with his shield. "We don't have shields in our culture," murmured Versidu Shie to the emperor. "It seems strange to my boy, I imagine. In our country, if you don't want to get hit, you move out of the way." When Severian Chorak was rearing back to begin another series of blinding attacks, the prince kicked at his tail, sending him falling back momentarily. In an instant, he had but rebounded, but the prince was also back on his feet. The two circled one another until the snake man sprung forward, katana extended. The prince saw his foe's plan and blocked the katana with his long sword and the wakizashi at his shield. Its short punching blade impaled itself in the metal, and Severian Chorak was thrown off balance. The prince's long blade slashed across the Akaviri's chest, and the sudden, intense pain caused him to drop both his weapons. In a moment, it was over. Severian Chorak was prostrate in the dust, with the prince's long sword at his throat. "The game's over!" shouted the emperor, barely heard over the applause from the stadium. The prince grinned and helped Severian Chorak up and over to a healer. The emperor clapped his potentate on the back, feeling relieved. He had not realized when the fight had begun how little chance he had given his son at victory. "You will make a fine warrior," said Versidu Shie, "and a great emperor." "Just remember," laughed the emperor, "you Akaviri have a lot of showy moves, but if just one strike comes through, it's all over for you." "Oh, I'll remember that," nodded the potentate. Remen thought about that comment for the rest of the games, and he had trouble fully enjoying himself. Could the potentate be another enemy, just as the empress had turned out to be? The matter would bear watching. 21st of Morning Star, 2920. Mournhold, Morrowind. "Why don't you wear that gown I gave you? That green gown I gave you?" asked the Duke of Mournhold, watching the young maiden put on her clothes. "It doesn't fit," smiled Turalia. "And you know I like red." "It doesn't fit because you're getting fat," laughed the Duke, pulling down her on the bed, kissing her breasts and the pouch of her stomach. She laughed at the tickles, but pulled herself up, wrapping her red robe around her. "I'm round like a woman should be," said Turalia. "Will I see you tomorrow?" "No," said the Duke. "I must entertain Vivek tomorrow, and the next day the Duke of Ebonheart is coming. Do you know, I never really appreciated Almalexia and her political skills until she left." "It is the same with me," smiled Turalia. "You will only appreciate me when I'm gone." "That's not true at all," snorted the Duke. "I appreciate you now." Turalia allowed the Duke one last kiss before she was out the door. She kept thinking about what he said. Would he appreciate her more or less when he knew that she was getting fat because she was carrying with his child? Would he appreciate her enough to marry her? The year continues in 20. Oh, there's a new guy, a new book that follows this. The year continues in 2920, Sun's Dawn, Volume 2. Wonder if I should continue from there. Oh wait, that's the next book. Ah, the sequel book. Excellent. All right. Third Sun's Dawn, 2920. The Isle of Atrium, Somerset Isle. Sotha Sil watched the initiates float one by one up to the awesome tree, taking a fruit or a flower from its high branches before dropping back to the ground with varying degrees of grace. He took a moment while nodding his head in approval to admire the day. The whitewashed statue of Cirabane, which the great mage was said to have posed for in ancient days, stood at the precipice of a cliff overlooking the bay. Pale purple proscato flowers waved to and fro in the gentle breeze. Beyond, ocean, and the misty border between Atrium and the main isle of Somerset. By and large acceptable, he proclaimed, as the last student dropped her fruit in his hand. With a wave of his hand, the fruit and flowers were back in the tree. With another wave, the student's head formed into a position in a semicircle around the sorcerer. He pulled a small fibrous ball about a foot and He pulled a small fibrous ball about a foot in diameter from his white robes. What is this? The students understood this test. It asked them to cast a spell of identification on the mysterious object. Each initiate closed his or her eyes and imagined the ball in the realm of the universal truth. Its energy had a unique resonance, as all physical and spiritual matter does. A negative aspect, a duplicate vision, relative paths, true meaning. A song in the cosmos, a texture in the fabric of space. A facet of being that has always existed and will always exist. A ball, said a young Nord named Welleg, which brought giggles from some of the younger initiates, but a frown from most, including Sotha Sil. If you must be stupid, at least be amusing, growled the sorcerer, and then looked at a young, dark-haired Altmer lass who looked confused. Lilathia, do you know? It's Grom, said Lilathia uncertainly. What the Joe meth after they've Crevinsim. Carvinseum, but very good nonetheless, said Drovasil. Now tell me, what does this mean? I don't know, admitted Lilathia. The rest of the students also shook their heads. There are layers to all things, said Sothia Sil. The common man looks at an object and fits it in a place in his way of thinking. Those skilled in the old ways, in the ways of the Sijic and mysticism, can see an object and identify it by its proper role. But one more layer is needed to peel back to achieve understanding. You must identify its object by its role and its truth and interpret that meaning. In this case, this is indeed Gram, which is a substance created by the Drow, an underwater race in the north and western parts of the continent. For 1 year of their life, they undergo Carvinasum. They undergo Carvinasum when they walk upon the land. Following that, they return to the water and meth, or devour the skin and organs they needed for land dwelling. Then they vomit it up like little balls like this. Grom. Drow vomit. The students looked at the ball a little queasy. Sotha still always loved this lesson. Fourth Sun's Dawn, 2920. The Imperial City, Cyrodiil. Spies, muttered the Emperor, sitting in his bath, staring at a lump on his foot. All around me, traitors and spies. His mistress, Rija, washed his back, her legs wrapped around his waist. She knew after all these many years when to be sensual and when not and when to be sexual. When he was in a mood like this, it was always best to be calmly, smoothly, seductively sensual, and not to say a word unless he asked for a direct question. Which he did. What do you think when a fellow steps in his Imperial Majesty's foot and says, "I'm sorry, Your Imperial Majesty"? Don't you think, "Pardon me, Your Miss Imperial Majesty" is more appropriate? "I'm sorry." Well, that almost sounds like the bastard Argonian was sorry I was His Imperial Majesty. That he hopes we lose the war with Morrowind. That's what it sounds like. What would make you feel better? Asked Rija. Would you make him flogged? Would you like him flogged? He is only, as you say, the battle chief of Soul Rest. It would teach him to mind where he's stepping. My father would have flogged him. My grandfather would have had him killed, the Emperor grumbled. But I don't mind if they step on my feet, provided they respect me and don't plot against me. You must trust someone. Only you, replied the Emperor, slightly turning to give Rija a kiss. And my son, Juliak, I suppose, though I wish we were a little more cautious. And your council and the Potenate? asked Rija. A pack of spies and a snake, laughed the Emperor, kissing his mistress again. As they began to make love, he whispered, As long as you're true, I can handle the world. 13 Suns Dawn, 2920, Morrowind, Mournhold. Turalia stood at the bejeweled city gates. A wind howled around her, but she felt nothing. The Duke had been furious upon hearing his favorite mistress was pregnant and cast her from his sight. She tried again and again to see him, but his guards turned her away. Finally, she returned to her family and told them the truth. If only she had lied and told them she did not know who the father was. A soldier, a wandering adventurer, anyone. But she told them that the father was a duke, a member of the house Indoril, and they did what she knew they would have to do as the proud members of the house of Redoran. Upon her hand was burned the sign of expulsion her weeping father had branded on her. But the Duke's cruelty hurt her far more. She looked at the gate and into the wide winter plains, twisted, sleeping trees and skies without birds. No one in Morrowind would take her in now. She must go far away. With slow, sad steps, she began her journey. Wait, so he knocked her up and then just got rid of her, and then the family had to brand her, and then now she's by herself. That sucks. Like on so many levels. Well, let's see where it goes. 16th Sun's Dawn, 2920. Senchal, Anaquina, or modern day Elsewhere. What troubles you? Asked Queen Hasama. Hasama, yeah, that's two A's in there. Hasaama. Hasaama. Hasama. Noticing her husband's sour mood. At the end of most lovers' days, he was in an excellent mood, dancing in the ballroom with all the guests. But not tonight. He retired early. When she found him, he was curled in bed, frowning. That blasted bard's tale about Polydor and Eloisia put me in a rotten state, he growled. Why did he have to be so depressing? But isn't that the truth of the tale, my dear? Weren't they doomed because of the cruel state of the world? It doesn't matter what the truth is. He did a rotten job of telling a rotten tale, and now I'm not going to let him do it anymore. King Josel sprang from the bed. His eyes were rheumy with tears. Where did they say he was from again? I believe Gliverdale in the eastern Valenwood, said the queen, shaken. My husband, what are you going to do? Drozel was out of the room in a single spring, bounding up the stairs to his tower. If Queen Hassama knew what her husband was going to do, she did not try to stop him. He had been erratic of late, prone to fits of even occasional seizures, but she never suspected the depths of his madness and his loathing for the bard in his tale of the wickedness and perversity around found in mortal men. I'll do the next entry, but ads are about to start in 3, 2, 1. I'll see you guys after the ads. And welcome back. So, when last we left off, we are back to Sun's Dawn, or the 19th Sun's Dawn, 2920, Gilverdale, Valenwood. Listen to me. Listen to me again, said the old carpenter. If cell 3 holds worthless brass, then cell 2 holds the gold key. If cell 1 holds the gold key, then cell 3 hold worthless brass. If 2 cells holds worthless brass, then cell 1 holds the gold key. I understand, said the lady. You told me, and so the cell 1 holds the gold key, right? No, said the carpenter. Let me start from the top. Mama, said the little boy, pulling on his mother's sleeve. Just one moment, dear. Mother's talking, she said, concentrating on the riddle. You said cell 3 holds the golden key if cell 2 holds worthless brass, right? No, said the carpenter patiently. Cell 3 holds worthless brass if cell 2... Mama, cried the boy. His mother finally looked. A bright red mist was pouring over the town in a wave, engulfing building after building in its wake. Striding before was a red-skinned giant, the Daedra Bolog Mal. He was smiling. Ooh, shit. What's Bolog Mal doing over here? Oh no. 29 Suns Dawn, 2920 Gilverdale, Valenwood. Almalexia stopped her steed in the vast moor of the mud to let him drink from the river. He refused to, even seemed repelled by the water. It struck her as odd, as they had been making excellent time from Mournhold, and surely he must be thirsty. She dismounted and joined her retinue. "Where are we now?" she asked. One of her ladies pulled out a map. "I thought we were approaching a town called Gilverdale." Almalexia closed her eyes and opened them again quickly. The vision was too much to bear. As her followers watched, she picked up a piece of brick and a fragment of bone and clutched them to her heart. "We must continue to Atrium," she said quietly. Ooh, and then we go to the next book. Okay, so that was Sun's Dawn. The first seed details the disaster of the attempted imperial invasion of Mournhold by Emperor Raymond III. Drama. Okay. Here we go. 15 First Seed, 2920. Care Suvio, Cyrodiil. From their vantage point high in the hills, the Emperor Raymond III could see the spires of the imperial city, but he knew he was far away from the hearth and home. Lord Glavius had a luxurious villa, but it was not close to being large enough to house an entire army within its walls. Tents lined the hillsides, and the soldiers were flocked to enjoy his lordship's famous hot springs. Little wonder, winter chill still hung in the air. "Prince Juliak, your son is not feeling well." Oh, that's potent. That's potentate. How did I make him sound again? "Prince Juliak, your son, is not feeling well." When potentate Versidu Shide spoke, the emperor jumped. How that Akavir could slither across the grass without making a sound was a mystery to him. "Poisoned, I'd wager," grumbled Raymond. "See to it that he gets a healer. I told him to hire a taster like I have. But the boy's headstrong. There are spies all around us. I know it." I believe you're right, Your Majesty," said Versidu Shine. "These are treacherous times, and we must take precautions to see that Morrowind does not win this war, either on the field or by more insidious means. This is why I would suggest that you not lead the vanguard into battle. I know you want to, as your illustrious ancestors Raymond I, Brazolus Dor, and Raymond II did, but I fear it would be foolhardy. I hope that you would not mind me speaking frankly like this." "No," nodded Raymond. "I think you're right. Who would lead the vanguard then?" "I would say Prince Juliak if he were feeling better," replied the Akavir. "Feeling that, Storig of Faerun, with Queen Naghira of Niverhold at left flank, and War Chief Ulak of Limoth at the right flank." "A Khajiit in the left flank and an Argonian at the right," frowned the Emperor. "I never do trust beast folk." What a racist. The potentate took no offense. He knew that beast folk referred to the natives of Termariel, not the Teeski of Akavir like himself. "I quite agree, Your Imperial Majesty, but you must agree that they hate the Dunmer. Ulak has a particular grudge against the slave raids and his lands by the Duke of Mournhold." The Emperor conceded that conceded it as so, and the potentate retired. It was surprising, thought Raman, but for the first time, the potentate seemed trustworthy. He was a good man to have at one's side. 18th First Seed, 2920. Ald Eruford, Morrowind. How far is the Imperial Army? Asked Vivek. 2 days' march, replied his lieutenant. If we march all night tonight, we can get higher ground at the Priai tomorrow morning. Our intelligence tells us the Emperor will be commanding in the rear, Storg of Farun as the guard, Naghia of River Hold at the left flank, and Ulkoth of Lilmoth at the right flank. Ulkoth, whispered Vivek, an idea forming. Is this intelligence reliable? Who brought it to us? A Breton spy from the Imperial Army, said the lieutenant, and gestured towards a young, sandy-haired man who stepped forward and bowed to Vivek. What is your name, and why is a Breton working for us in the Cyrodiils? Against Cyrodiils? Asked Vivek, smiling. My name is Cassie Whitley of Direwin, said the man, and I am working for you because not everyone can say he spied for a god, and I understood it will be, well, profitable. Vivek laughed. It will be if your information is accurate. 19. First Seed, 2920. Bordrum, Morrowind. The quiet hamlet of Bordrum looked down on the meandering river, the Priai. It was an idyllic state, lightly wooded, where the water took the bend around a deep bluff to the east, with a gorgeous wildflower meadow to the west. The strange flora of Morrowind met the strange flora of Cyrodiil on the border, and coming led gloriously. There'll be time to sleep when you're finished. The soldiers had been hearing that all morning. It was not enough they had been marching all night. Now they were chopping down trees on the bluff and damming the river so its water spilled over. Most of them had reached the point they were too tired to complain about being tired. Let me be certain I understand, my lord, said Vivek's lieutenant. We take the bluffs so we can fire arrows and spells down on them from above. That's why we need all the trees cleared out. Damming the river floods the plain below, so they'll be trudging around through mud, which should hamper their movement. That's exactly half of it, said Vivek approvingly. He grabbed a nearby soldier who was hauling off one of the trees. Wait, I need you to break off the straightest, strongest branches of the trees and whittle them into spears. If you recruit 100 or so of the others, it won't take you more than a few hours to make all we need. The soldier wearily did as he was bade. The men and women got to work fashioning spears from the trees. If you don't mind me asking, said the lieutenant, the soldiers don't need any more weapons. They're too tired and hold the ones they've got. These spears aren't for holding, said Vivek and whispered. If we tire them out today, they'll get a good night's sleep tonight before he got... Getting weary-eyed. If you don't mind me asking, said the lieutenant, these soldiers don't need any more weapons. They're too tired to hold the ones they've got. The spears aren't for holding, said Vivek, and whispered. If we tire them out today, they'll get a good night's sleep tonight. Before he got to work supervising their work. It was essential they be sharp, of course, but equally important that they be well balanced and tapered proportionally. The perfect point for stability was a pyramid, not the conical point of some lances or spears. He had the men hurl the spears they had completed to test their strength, sharpness, and balance, forcing them to begin on a new one if they broke. Gradually, out of sheer exhaustion from doing it wrong, the men learned how to create the perfect wooden spears. Once they were through, he showed them how they were to be arranged and where. That night, there was no drunken pre-battle carousing, and no nervous neophytes stayed up worrying about the battle to come. As soon as the sun sank beneath the wooded hills, the camp was at rest, but for the sentries. That's interesting. Basically tiring them out so they're not nervous and get a good night's rest before a battle. Never thought of it that way, but hey. Alright. 21st seed. 2920, Boardroom, Morrowind. Miramore was exhausted. For last 6 days, he had gambled and whored all night and then marched all day. He was looking forward to the battle, but even before that, he was looking forward to some rest afterwards. He was in the Emperor's command at the rear flank, which was good because it seemed unlikely that he would be killed. On the other hand, it meant traveling over the mud and waste the army had left in their wake. As they began to trek through the wildflower field, Miramore and all the soldiers around him sank ankle deep in cold mud. It was an effort to even keep moving. Far up ahead, you could see the vanguard of the enemy led by Lord Storig emerging from the meadow at the base of a bluff. That was when it all happened. An army of Dunmer appeared above the bluff like a rising Daedra, pouring fire and floods of arrows down the vanguard. Simultaneously, a company of men bearing the flag of Duke Mournhold galloped around the shore, disappearing along the shallow river's edge where it dipped and timbered glen to the east. War Chief Ulaktha, nearby on the right flank, let out a bellow of revenge at the sight and gave chase. Queen Naghira sent her flank towards the embankment to the west to interpret the enemy on the bluff. The Emperor could think of nothing to do. His troops were too bogged down to move forward. Words. I'm sorry, let me try that one more time. The Emperor could think of nothing to do. His troops were too bogged down to move forward quickly and join the battle. He ordered them to face east against the timber, in case Mournhold's company was trying to circle through the woods. They never came out, but many men, facing west, missed the battle entirely. Miramore kept his eyes on the bluff. A tall Dunmer he supposed must have been Vivek gave a signal, and the battle mages cast their spells at something to the west. From what transpired, Miramore deduced it was a dam. A great torrent of water spilled out, washing Naghira's left flank to the remains of the vanguard, and together down to the east. The Emperor paused, as if waiting for his vanquished army to return, and then called a retreat. Miramore hid in the rushes until they had passed by, and then waded as quietly as he could to the bluff. The Morrowind army was retiring as well back in their camp. He could hear them celebrating above him as he padded along the shore. To the east, he saw the Imperial army. They had been washed into a net of spears strung across the river. Naghira's left flank on Storig's vanguard, on Ulka's right flank, bodies of hundreds of soldiers strung together like beads. Miramore took whatever valuables he could carry from the corpses and then ran down the river. He had to go many miles before the water was clear again, unpolluted by blood. Wow, I'm going to take a pause in there real quick because we see all of this preparation from these different sides of the war happening. So, the spears were meant as traps. The trees were cut down so they can shoot arrows and spells from a high vantage point. Those trees were piled along the river to create a dam and unleashed to wash away the soldiers and have them fall against those spears that were created. Nasty, but that's war. Well, high fantasy war anyway. Oh, goodness me. I feel like my eyes are starting to water, and so I think I might stop for now. We're going to stop here on the 29th seed. So 29 first seed, 2029. The story starts in Hammerfell. Looks like they're going to be talking about... Actually, the book's about to finish. I'll do this last segment first, and then we'll call it there. And then we'll maybe read out. You have a letter from the Imperial City, said the chief. Oh, you have a letter from the Imperial City, said the chief priestess, handing the parchment over to Corda. All the young priestesses smiled and made faces of astonishment, but the truth was that Corda's sister, Rija, wrote very often, at least once a month. Corda took the letter to the garden to read it, her favorite place, an oasis in the monochromatic sand-colored world of the conservatorium. The letter itself was nothing unusual, filled with court gossip and the latest fashions which were trending to wine-dark velvets, and reports of the Emperor's ever-growing paranoia. You are so lucky to be away from all this, wrote Rija. The Emperor is convinced that his latest battlefield fiasco is all the result of spies in the palace. He's even taken to questioning me. Ruptoga, keep it so that you never have a life as interesting as mine. Corda listened to the sounds of the desert and prayed to Ruptuga, the exact opposite wish. This continues in the next volume, Rain's Hand. 2920 Volume 4 follows Sultasil and his initiates in their negotiation and dealings with Daedra after the destruction of Gilverdale by Molag Bal. Guys, there are so many books in Skyrim. I'm looking at the scroll wheel when I scroll down to see how many books there are. There's a lot. There's a lot of books. So, needless to say, we are going to continue doing this. But that's next time. For now, I'm going to see if my Oshi is online. She's probably still online. And we're gonna send you over to her. Let's see. Yep, she's still online. Well, this was fun. I do enjoy a good read. And unfortunately, because of Twitch TOS and copyright, I can't exactly read any old story. So, Skyrim books will have to do. Alright, that said, everyone, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. A fantastic night, and even better tomorrow. And remember, stay frosty. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.